All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everybody's having a great Sunday. We just reached 10,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, and I want to thank you all for being here and subscribing. We'll get started with the chat here in just a second. Hi, Didier. Hope you're doing good. I got your email about the alarm on your 924S. I did see it. So thank you for the pictures. That was the first 924S I've ever seen with an alarm. It's not to say there isn't more out there, but I believe that they were all optional. I've seen a lot of them, never seen an alarm. So like I was saying, thank everyone for getting us to 10,000 subs here. And like I mentioned, that our 10,000 subscribers going to win a prize pack from us. So I look forward to reaching out to them soon. I also want to remind everyone that the Helen Meat registration for 2025 is open. It's going to be, let me check the dates, but it's going to be not the very first weekend in June, since it's part of the end of May. I'm trying to look at the calendar here, and it's not coming up. But I should be more organized than this, but it just came to mind. So someone wrote June 8th. Yeah, I believe it's going to be on Friday through Sunday. And it's going to be a great time. What we do is we go out and we meet up Friday night, have dinner. We stay in hotel rooms and then just sort of meet up for breakfast next morning. And then afterwards, we go on a drive. Okay, so thank you, Chris, for bailing me out there. It's going to be Friday, June 6th to Sunday the 8th. So be sure to register. You can just go to my website, adreas.com, and give it a few seconds, and it'll pop up and remind you that the Helen Meet, which is in Helen, Georgia, in June 6th through 8th. And you can join us there, register there, and then join us. So Didier says he has no option codes, though. That's interesting. He also said that the key works when it's turned to the side rather than straight up. So never know. Maybe someone's got something going on there, but you can never tell. We see things on these cars that shouldn't be there, and they're there. So sometimes people say that this didn't happen until 1987, so only 1987 models have such and such, but we'll see it on 86 models sometimes. It just depends on the manufacturing date. So sometimes you see stuff that you wouldn't expect. So it has been known to happen. Let's see. Chris asked, did it snow up your way last week? It did. This week we got maybe, I think the first time we got maybe an 1/8 inch of snow. This time we got a little bit more than that. Maybe, I couldn't really tell you. It's very, very small, just a little more than the 1/8. But it did cover the ground, and it made a sheet of ice out of the road in my neighborhood. But we got an all-wheel drive for that, so not a big deal. Adam says hello again from Cape Town. Well, hello, Adam. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. What time is it there? It's probably late in the evening. Chris says the question is, will my car be there at the event? Well, I hope so. Getting ready to send some stuff to paint, and hopefully we'll have it back. So this cold weather is not really helping with stuff around here at all. MT, good morning. So yeah, I just sometimes read the chat here. Sometimes we'll have some videos to watch. This morning, I was out of town last week, and then I got back, and it was a crazy week. So we got some cars out, some new cars in. So I figured we'd just talk about that, and then whatever comes up in the chat. There's always some interesting stuff that pops up. I'm gonna try not to walk around. People ask me to walk around, then I get to walking around, and then just pacing back and forth. I'm going outside and coming inside. So try and make this a little less dizzying for you guys. So Mo Money asks, good morning, Brent, or good afternoon, Brent. What is your opinion on strut bars? Do they make a difference? So I've driven quite a few cars with them, but never on the track, so I don't really have an opinion on it. I will say from just driving them on the street and poking around the neighborhood. So where I used to be at the old shop, we could get out and drive cars. But here, it's just a bunch of traffic. We have some little neighborhood roads we can go down, but we can't go any faster than 20 miles an hour. So if I do the loop, that's what I call it. We go down about 2 miles and then come back up and then come around this way just to flow with traffic when we're doing test drives. And basically, we're just making sure the cars don't overheat and everything's getting good lubrication. But they do tend to feel a little bit tighter. But I mean, it's one of those things that I can't back that up scientifically. Kenneth says, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, Kenneth. Kevin says, did you get all your stuff moved to your new place yet? No, we're not. Everything's pretty much here, but we still have a lot of stuff over at the other shop. We still do a lot of the head rebuilding and cleaning up parts over there and plating because I just don't have enough room over here. I try and keep it a little bit organized. If I was to move everything in here, we would have no room to work, as we already don't have very much room to work. So stuff's got to stay over there for now. I'm thinking about hiring a part-time person to work over there and just park cars, organize stuff. So this might be a great time. If you guys are looking for a job or know anybody that's looking for a job that wants to work on 944s, basically, I'd have that person park cars for me, clean up parts, send alternators to be fixed, and then we put them on the shelf for when we need them, starters to be fixed, and then put those on the shelf. And then they would tear down the parts, clean the parts, sandblast them, put the parts in the power washer or the sonic clean washer, and then put all those parts up, and then we plate parts, basically sandblast everything so it can be plated and put parts up. And then as I need parts, I can go over there and get them. But basically they would tear down a car, organize stuff that we don't need or we have tons of stuff of. I could go over there and build engines out of like a bunch of spare parts and then sell those. And then if it's just stuff that we just don't need, sell them on eBay. So their job would be parting cars, organizing parts, having parts redone. We'd send them off to the place that rebuilds them, starters and alternators. Then they would come back, put them on the shelf, just basically organizing stuff, cleaning up parts, and then having them plated. They'd be in charge of doing all that stuff. But I guess they'd make most of the money by just selling stuff we don't need on eBay. So I would be paying them, but the business would make a lot of money off that because most of the stuff that's going to be cleaned is going to go on engines that we're working on here, cars that we're working on here. So interesting job, be in an outdoor mostly job, but it would be indoor parts where it's heated or air conditioned. MTC. MT says, I got one. I would like to put in the Volvo electric power steering pump assembly to restore the power steering on my 84 that's been converted to manual. Been done on a 944 before. That is an interesting question. I know that some people have converted to electric power steering. I believe they've done that when they're doing the V8 swaps, but I don't know that they've ever done a Volvo one or where they got it. I know the BMW electric brake booster is a popular swap on those cars, but I'm not exactly sure. I wouldn't say that everything that we do here is, how do you say, unmodified, but we don't do a lot of stuff like that. Unfortunately, sorry, I'm no help. Stuart says, hi guys. Well, good morning, Stuart. Mo Money says Central Piedmont Community College has graduates from their automotive systems technology program that you can send. So that's interesting that you bring that up. I got an email because I've partnered with them before to put out resumes, and they emailed me and told me that they're actually having a career day, and so I've signed up for that. So very coincidental that you asked about that, but yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go to the career day up there, and we're just gonna see if we can find some young guys. I'd like to get someone in on the ground floor. A lot of older guys, they know how to do this stuff already, or sometimes have habits, good or bad. But I found that working with younger guys, just getting into it, has worked out a lot better for me. Kenneth says, it snowed here last week. Got down to 4 degrees in one day. Noticed when I added oil, milkshake on cap. Should I change the oil ASAP? So sometimes that milkshake is just humidity in the oil that's burning off. So if it's a lot, you might want to look into it. But if you're driving the car a lot, say you're putting on like more than 20 miles a day, that won't build up as much. But if you're just going around the block, normally oil really likes, especially a high zinc content oil. I don't know that for real, but from my experience, if you have diesel oil that has like a high amount of zinc in it, or this 20W50 stuff, it just absorbs water, sit on top of the oil. And as you're driving, if you don't drive very long distances, it'll try and, of course, the cap is the top part of the oil system. So it'll make a film up there. So if you're driving your car daily, more than 20 miles, and you're getting the engine really good and hot, and it's going out the air oil separator seals, well, out the back into the engine, and it's burning off, then you shouldn't see that. But if you're driving a little bit and you haven't driven it in a while, you may see that. It doesn't really mean anything. Happy Fox says, I thought Toyota has a better options on the servo. They might. I haven't looked into any of that. I go to the junkyard every now and then to find parts for cars, and I don't really look at the newer ones, but you never know what you'll find in the junkyard. I know a lot of cars have gone to electric power steering and stuff, so never know. You might be able to just go to a U-Pool or something and find something for a couple of $100. So Stuart says, what oil do you guys use in the States with catalytic converter? Inverter? We use VR1, ZDDP, and you can't use it in California, 84, or will it wreck the cat? So that's a good question. So they've reduced ZDDP in a lot of modern oils because it does wreck the cat, but a lot of guys still use it. So what we use here, will it wreck the cat? Yeah. Does it? I don't get a lot of clogged cats here. So are the cats still functioning properly? Probably not. How many guys in states have deleted their cat? Probably a lot. Are they supposed to? No, I didn't say to do so. Didn't say I don't know anything about it. But I know what I see on Facebook. But you know, but here we run the cats in all the cars, and we use the VR1. Nothing's clogged. Is it still efficient? Probably not. Do oxygen sensors still do their job? Yeah. Does the car know? Probably doesn't know the difference. As long as it's not clogged and the O2 sensor is functioning. Didier says, I need to replace my key lock stock support on my 924S. Is there a way to remove the key barrel without drilling the support? Unfortunately not. What you might be able to do is, it's probably an expensive option, so is try and get another barrel that's already keyed for it. But yeah, it's not a fun one. But the alternative to that is if we've got a car here and the ignition switch is just completely wore out on like a 924S or something, it happens sometimes. We'll just go to a parts breaker and just rekey the entire car to that. It's just cheaper to do that. We'll replace the ignition switch with a good one so we don't have to drill that out. Whatever key goes to that ignition switch, we make all the locks on the car work with them. Nardo Gray says, hi from Los Angeles. We are finally getting some much needed rain for the fires. We lost many classics. I'm glad you could join us. Hope you're staying safe out there. I'm glad you're finally getting some rain. That's terrible what's happening out there. So I'm glad you guys are finally getting some relief. Hopefully that'll be over soon. It's a beautiful place out there. I drove those hills a couple of years ago, and I've done it many times. So our thoughts are with you. Volvo is overhyped in the States and totally overpriced. Happy Fox says that. Happy Fox says, you mean not at all, and opening and getting it. Yeah, pretty much you got to drill into it to get that out. Like I said, you're better off just finding a car that doesn't need any of those locks anymore and just rekeying the car to it. Stuart says, is it easy to delete the cat? I'm in the UK, so we're not so strict. I would have thought you guys were pretty strict about that stuff, knowing you have those hardcore MOTs over there. But yeah, if you don't need it, they make straight pipes. You can look online and it's just a cat delete. Again, you didn't hear it. I don't know anything about that. Of course, you're not in the US, so. Federally, we're not supposed to do anything to those. So they're supposed to be there. Now, whether or not someone gets up underneath there and makes sure they're there, that's another story. But Happy Fox, the cat. How do you know how clogged it is? Are there any telltale signs? Yeah, when a cat starts getting clogged, it'll get very, very hot and it'll glow red. Heard stories of catalytics setting grass on fire in fields from where someone drove across from. I don't see any of that. I maybe seen one turbo with a clogged cat, but there's a lot of factors that go into that too. So one of the things is that if your cat it's got to get to the right temperature before it starts working too. You don't want to get too hot because it's clogged, but it has to get up to the right temperature. So if it's functioning at the right temperature, should put ours in a pretty good spot to where, I don't see a lot of cat failures. A lot of times they just want to get rid of them, but don't do that here. I don't know nothing about it. It's just what I see on Facebook. So anyway, guys, we've got a crazy mess in here today. We got a black turbo out, and now we have a 89 black S2 in here. So it needed new belts, water pump. It's just time for it. They were last done around 2017. It's always good to go through and do all this stuff. The oil cooler seals were original, and we really don't want to run around with original oil cooler seals. Nardo Gray says if it's really clogged up. Yeah, it'll give you some signs of running poorly long before it starts getting cherry red, but not always. But Casey says, nice shirt. Thanks. So I'll tell you an interesting story that happened this week. So over the past couple of months, we a few months ago we had a turbo come in, and I'd heard stories about this, but never really saw it firsthand. So this guy comes to us, and there's two things that this could be, both of which I've never seen firsthand. But I have someone close to me that had one of the things happen. So the guy's driving around. He's got no boost whatsoever. So I'm reading comments. I'm going to ignore the comments for now. Sorry. So this guy comes in. He's got no boost whatsoever on his 944 turbo. Whenever you just try and floor it, it goes up to like not even the one bar on there, which is like 0 psi. So it's not building boost at all. It's just basically doesn't have any vacuum when the throttle's open. So I tell him that you start with the easiest thing, check the wastegate. So he clamps the wastegate, still does that. So you should have all the boost if you clamp wastegate. So I said, well, take the wastegate off to make sure it's actually closing. Takes that off. I said, okay, well, you could be getting to something interesting here, like one of those collapsed pipes. So he checks all that out. And he does notice that while he's doing this, that if he takes the turbo and turns it, he can't turn it. But if he uses a wrench, it'll pop free and he can spin it freely. So at that point, it's pipes are clear, wastegate's good. Check the turbo. Pulls turbo, ceramic parts all in there from the head. So now he's got to pull the head. So always something interesting. It's few and far between that happens. Never seen it firsthand until really now. But there you go, guys. That's some interesting stuff to look out for. Let's go back and read some comments. Do you need any engine adjustments when? Not at all. Deleting the cat. No, because it's free-flowing cat. It's an open muffler, so it doesn't do anything at all. Might run a little bit better. I haven't noticed that. Not that I know anything about that, but no. On turbos, I've heard it makes a difference on a turbo, but on NA, I wouldn't expect much of anything. JR says, for an 87 turbo, how often will you change the timing belt and all of it if it's less than 500 miles since driven the last change? If it's been less than 500 miles. I mean, I would do it probably at least after 6 years. I mean, I would just change the belt. I would look at the rollers. I'd make sure the rollers still spin after being in one spot for so long, and then change the timing belt, and that'd be about the end of it. I wouldn't worry about it. I mean, if this was the old 80s technology belts, yeah, I would change the belt no matter what. But these newer belts, they don't rot as much. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it too much. This one here is a 57,000 mile. So the turbo we had was 47,000 mile. I believe this one's 57,000 mile. And so it's not been driven much, probably since 2017. There's no telling. But the wool cooler seals were original, so it's good that we got those out of there. The water pump was probably fine. I mean, depending on how much you drive it, I don't see changing the water pump every time you do the belt service and stuff, unless you've got a lot of corrosion in there. That, I mean, there's always an exception for stuff. If you've got rust in your cooling system, you probably want to go ahead and replace all that and get that over with. Happy Fox says, if oil pressure drops kind of overnight, what can it be in a short period? If you start it up again, so if you start up and it's 5 bar, and then you drive it, and then it goes down to 2.5, 3 bar, somewhere around that, and then that's where it is when it's really hot. There's absolutely nothing to worry about. That is proper operation of the engine. But you turn it off and you let it sit overnight, and you start it up, and you've only got 2 or 3 bar at idle. Then I'd look at your OPRV. Of course, we did have that problem with that one car where you'd start it up and it only had 3 bar, and it ended up being that someone just did a terrible job of engine assembly on it, and we figured that out. But for it to just happen overnight, you have 5 bar and it goes down, and the next day you start it up and you've only got 3 bar, something's going on there. You probably, got something going on there. But if it's just while hot at idle, and then the next time you start it up, it's back up to 5 bar, that's completely normal. Porsche even says that on a really hot day in a turbo, you might see 0.5 bar on one of these engines. So it'd go down below 1 bar. And I've seen it on my car, being at the track. Started up the next day, got 5 bar, no problem. He said, I know, I don't worry, but it's pegging at 5 bar, but it used to stay around 3 bar when hot. That's fine. That's just the way it is. So I mentioned many, many times that my 924S has about 350,000 miles on the bottom end of it. The only thing I've ever done was the belts, the oil coolers, and the seals, and I took the head off just for good measure because I didn't want to blow a head gasket that was 50 years old, So I just went ahead and did all the stuff that needed, and I didn't change the rod bearings or anything. But I drive it. I put synthetic in it, and I drive the heck out of it. And I have noticed that, like, over the past 10 years, from starting at 5 bar, it's now to 5.5 bar, So that's lost about half a bar in 10 years. And it used to be about 3, and now it's gone down to 2.5 when hot. But oh well. Keep on going. JR says, if it's the 1 bar difference, that makes me curious. It's perfectly fine. I wouldn't worry about it. You could rebuild the engine and you probably wouldn't get that back. If you want to, you can probably try putting a new seal on the OPRV or something. I could probably do the same on mine, but car runs perfectly fine. The oil pressure being off a half bar is not end of the world. JR says, if you have a crack in the one-piece crossover pipe, is it better to change to the late crossover pipe or just replace the two-piece or find an intact? If you're going to be replacing it, I would get the two-piece. It just makes life so much easier. I always try to upgrade to the two-piece. So even if we got a car here that originally came with a one-piece crossover pipe, I just go ahead and upgrade them to two-piece because you got to remove it to do everything at that point. So that's what we try and do. So I do recommend it. No Money says the black 951 post on Facebook is beautiful. Yes, it was. It's a very beautiful car. Sat since around 1995. And we got it in here. It had leaks from the transaxles. You got to drive these cars, man. And the fuel tank was leaking, but that was because he wanted to change the strainer and the collar came out, and that just happened. So what we did was we took another fuel tank. I couldn't get that collar back out after he glued it in. It was still leaking really badly, but I could not get that collar out without damaging the tank at that point. Put some really strong glue in there. Unfortunately, it wasn't fuel proof, so that thing was stuck. Got another tank. It was a spare tank that I had that had the collar ripped out of it too. We ordered a 928 RS collar replacement, put that in there, fixed it, got the transmission all sealed up, and then we went to start it. And I was talking on the live stream one day not too long ago that it sounded like a cylinder's down. Usually when these cars sit, fuel injectors get clogged, fuel system gets clogged up. He'd gone through and replaced pretty much everything at the back, so that was fine. But I was thinking the fuel injectors clogged because I had a misfire. No big deal. Take it outside. After looking at the injectors, everything's fine. Pull the injectors. They're spraying perfect. Try and drive it, and it wouldn't got the slight incline of the shop. So ended up doing a compression test, and we had 60 psi on cylinder 4, and then we had 0 psi on cylinder 2. 1 and 3 were at 120. So not fun, not what you want to do, especially when you're like, cars going home, got more coming in. So had a big vacuum leak on it from the intake. So we take the intake off. We put some seafoam down in there for a few days, let it sit. I think that was a Friday. I didn't get back till Monday. We just vacuumed it out, rotated it, and had 120 back in all the cylinders. So sitting since 1995 in the same place, froze some rings up, and luckily it wasn't valves. You could kind of tell because I put a little bit of oil in there just to see, and sealed it up. Didn't get all the compression back, but it did after it sat in seafoam for about 4 days. So that was great. But yes, that car was beautiful, and I hope you get to enjoy it now, because you don't see many 47,000 mile cars. I think that, or is it 37,000 mile? And this one's 47, or is this one 57? I can't remember. But low mileage turbos. The funny thing is that these were 10,000 miles apart. I can't keep them straight, and they're almost identical, other than one being an S2. But very lovely cars, both of them. That this one has. Now, I believe in 89, they went to the, you guys can correct me, I don't keep up with the interiors that much. A lot of times what I do is when I get a car in here, I just Google it. I try and keep up with the colors, but I believe that this one is the cashmere. I believe by 89, they'd come out with that. So it's not the light gray. And if it is the light gray, it looks good, but I can't remember what year the cashmere came out. They look identical to me. Just the light gray. Door didn't want to shut. That's how tight it is. Everything's still sealed. Like you got to slam the door to get it shut. But beautiful interior. And we have this cover off because, well, we like to time it this way. We always want to make sure that the person that did the work before us did it right. And the only way to do that is double check it. From what we're seeing, whoever worked on this car did a fantastic job. Don't see that very often. We always catch one or two things, but so far it looks like this was done by someone that knows these cars. So we didn't have a record of when the chain pads were done, so we decided that since we've got to time it anyway, we'll take a look at them. And they look new. There's not a scratch on them. So I'll probably, since the chain pads don't typically wear out, they can go 90,000 miles. I mean, can't warranty it. We didn't do the work, but there's not a scratch on them. I'll tell them that they're probably going to be good for another couple of years. Give them a recommendation of when they need to be done, or at least inspected next time, and that's all I'll do. I don't try and sell things to people that they don't need, and because usually we want to get these cars out of here as fast as possible. But not only that, we don't, that doesn't mean that we want to half-ass anything, but it's it's a big job, and if it doesn't need to be done, why does the customer need to be charged for something he doesn't need because it looks like it was done recently? So let's see. Happy Fox asks, is that the oil getting up? In some cases it is. So I've seen the oil pressure drop in cars drastically when the oil is getting old. So it's a possibility. So what I'll do in my car, sometimes I run 1540 full synthetic in my car since it's all resealed, and the car drives so much better because the oil is a little bit thinner. But I noticed the oil pressure is not as high as it normally is, and I'll go right back to 20W50 in the summer, right back up. So, and then I've also noticed on these cars that have had oil sitting in them for many, many years. That's another thing. If you're using like conventional oil, you still want to try and change that oil every 3 months, especially if you're sitting in a high humidity area. If you live down in Florida, where that zinc can attract a lot of oil, so it's a lot of people don't bring up is that they try and go by mileage more than they do age. Oil gets water in it, so kind of want to change your oil more frequently. If you're going to something that doesn't collect as much oil in it, such as synthetics and stuff, then you can go that. But I don't know. I've never been one of those that I'm not going to drive my car 7,500 miles, even with synthetic in it. So you never know. There's a lot of different factors there. He says, is the OPRV a reasonable suspect since it kind of happens fast? Like, how fast does this happen? I mean, it should take, 15 minutes of driving. Once the oil comes up to temp, the oil is going to thin out, even if it's 20W50. It thins out at temperature, and then it's going to make the pressure drop. He's like, every 3 months. Yeah, well, I mean, the oil's the lifeblood of your car. You want to make sure it stays in good shape. Do I always follow it? No, but I just make sure that, like, when I'm doing it, get a few comments here. Well, that's why they recommend every 3 months. It's not a set in stone thing. It's just you should be checking your oil to make sure you don't have like water sitting in it. Because if you're especially if you don't drive it a lot, like the other guy, he has what they call mayonnaise on top. So he says it happened kind of fast. So you think that was just from some sediment? I mean, there's absolutely no telling. I mean, The oil could be old. It could need the OPRV spring could be weakening in it. It could be just normal. It might have been, I mean, you wouldn't be surprised at how many times you get people that just notice something for the first time. It's kind of like, I know that when my parents bought a Jeep, I'm like, look at all these Jeeps. Why? Where did they come from? They were always there. You just didn't notice it before. It's kind of like maybe one day you're driving your car for 3 months and you look down and you're like, wow, it's a 3 bar. Is it supposed to be a 3 bar? It's always been a 3 bar. And you're just kind of, noticing things for the first time. So that to me doesn't sound like anything to be worried about. So JR says, regardless of how often you drive, how often would you change the oil for your 87 turbo? One time a year? Oh, well, I change it way more than one time a year. But if I'm going with synthetic and it's sitting in the garage and it's not in a high humidity place, then and I only drive it to 944 Fest and I drive it to the hell of me, yeah, I'll probably get away with that. Yeah. I don't drive it enough to worry about it. As long as I go out there and it looks fine, there's no water in it and it's not floating on top of the thing. You'll get that with if you're running that high zinc oil, conventional stuff. Like, yeah, I would change it before I drove it. So I haven't driven my car, and I changed the oil before 944 Fest in September, and that's about the last time I drove it. So it's been 5-6 months now. Not really going to worry about that oil, but yeah, if I was letting it sit outside and it had conventional oil in it, yeah, I'd probably change it again before I drove it. Chris says, hey, I just remembered that my oil pressure wasn't even registering, and we thought it was the switched the wires, but it wasn't. Did you get that working again? So I do think we got that fixed. I think it was the gauge. Remember, we had to change out the whole cluster. So sometimes I'm trying to read these things. They're like moving so quick. And I've got to go back to where it was. So says, no, I'm not worried about the pressure being too low. I'm just trying to understand what's happening. Oh, like in the engine in general, why you have 5 bars starting up and then it goes down to 3 and 4. That's what you're wondering. So basically, the oil thins out. It gets hotter. It gets easier to flow. And when you first start up, your oil pressure the oil pressure regulator, the OPRV in there, is you're probably going to have like 70 psi or more, because this is just an example. For instance, it's spring pressure, so that's probably what's, God knows what's coming through the pump at that. Could be over 100 psi, but it wants to keep it around 70, for instance. So the spring is pushed open, and then of course, as the oil is warmer and it's easier to flow, the spring's going to close. So even sometimes when it's all the way closed at idle, for instance, then the pressure is going to go down. So we could say that at idle, the spring idle with the engine warm, the oil hot, your spring's closed, it's going to go down. It's trying to keep it as high as possible because it can go up to 70 psi, for instance, but that's all the oil pressure from the pump can allow. And then as you rev it, obviously the pump spins faster and it's going to go back up to 4 and 5 bar. And then once the oil cools off and it becomes thicker again, you're going to see that your oil pressure is going to go back up. So that's basically all that's happening there. That's how that works. Casey says, driven racing oil, HR1 conventional, 15W50 motor oil, 1 course. Awesome. Yeah, I don't really have a preference. I know that like these forums sometimes and Facebook comments, there people get crazy about what oil's got to be in there, and it's just oil's come a long way. And yes, they got rid of a lot of ZDDP, and they don't use flat tappets anymore for lifters, but you still see failures of the roller lifters too. So, if anything, I don't really want to get into that about how we do stuff. Just because there's always someone out there who's going to be like, oh, but it's so funny that like there's so many questions on it and then nobody wants to answer it. So I'll do my best, but I don't. It's kind of one of those things where I think it's a cop out for people that do know about oil to just be like, well, you should know about oil. I don't want to have to answer that. There's been a million threads on it. It's kind of like, it's just a cop out. So, do you recommend synthetic over conventional oil and turbo? So, the reason why I will put synthetic in my own car, and I will if we rebuild an engine. So, I will only do that if it's got brand new seals in it. I wouldn't do that otherwise. Some of the older seals, I don't know if Porsche did it. I hadn't seen any evidence of this, but some of the older seals, especially like I had an old Cadillac from the 60s, and those seals would dissolve in oil. So, we've come a long way since then. But when people talk about synthetic oils, you can't use those in classic cars. Well, yeah, those seals dissolved in oil, so you couldn't really use any oil with those engines back then. So it's not a big deal. Put it in and enjoy it. If your car doesn't have any leaks to begin with and you've got all new seals in there, it's not a problem. Jason says, I put a new Blaupunk radio in my 83 944. Now I have a parasitic draw from it. Any tips to deal with this? Oh, interesting. So, is it the radio itself? If it's the radio itself, then just have to try another radio. I guess there could be something shorting out in there, something. But the way that we find parasitic draws like that is, of course, we use our multimeter and we disconnect the negative lead on it, and then we set it up so that way it will draw current and amps through the multimeter, and we'll put it on each fuse. It's easier on the later cars because you can see the tops of the fuse and they have a little post sticking out. Best way to describe it, you can see the top of and you just run that across the top, and you'll see that when it starts drawing current, then that way you don't have to pull every fuse and stick something down in there. And then we would know that's on the radio fuse circuit, and then we would see what else is on there. On the radio fuse circuit, I believe that the same relay powers the sunroof and a bunch of other stuff too. I want to say that I'll just stop there. I know that there's a relay, but I want to say that there's other stuff on there too, but I can't really remember right off. And it changes from the early cars to the later cars. So try and just single out. If it's your radio, then there could be those. Sadly, the new Blaupunks aren't as good as the old ones. They do make some really nice ones that I do recommend putting in people's cars, and we do do the the retro ones. I really enjoy those. Those are pretty good radios, but some of them you get for like $10. They're not top quality. So it's hit and miss with some of those. Mo Money says, I recommended the Power Acoustic CP170 wireless Apple CarPlay and the single DIN. Yeah, awesome. That's a good setup. We're actually going to put a radio in this car, and it's probably going to be one of the flip outs. So he can have a touch screen, but he doesn't lose his cubby hole. Happy Fox says, I look more at my gauges than the speedometer. It's like I check the OP every time, the oil pressure every 3 months. I got you. Elliot says, it runs fine in mine. Good to see you. Good to see you, Elliot. How you been? Happy Fox makes sense. When my oil cooler was leaky, it squirted more with this semi-synthetic than the classic mineral oil. Interesting. JB says, hi, Brent. Finally seeing you live. Well, awesome. I'm glad you could be here. I said I got one of those new retro. This is Jason again with the Blaupunk. Says, I got one of those new retro looking ones. I think it's because of its Bluetooth. It's always on, even when I don't have the key in. I might have to figure out how to turn it off. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, that might be a fault in the radio itself. I've installed 3 of them. I don't know if that, well, it's a good question. I don't know that I checked to see if there was a parasitic draw, but there's always going to be a little bit due to memory, how it stores the radio stations and stuff, but I don't think it would leave Bluetooth on all the time, or it shouldn't. But you're going to have a little bit, but it shouldn't be enough to drain the battery down. But that's just common. Was it like 3 milliamps or something? It's like the normal pull on that. Might be wrong on that. I'm trying to think from memory, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's like 3 milliamps you don't want. Before I work on people's cars, I always go back and I'm like, okay, we have this. What are we looking for? Okay. I'll look the notes up. Sometimes just off the top of my head, I'm just like, I don't know. Mark says, hi, Brent. Have you ever seen a no-start condition caused by the KLR? Yes, absolutely have. And I actually was going to make a video on that whole thing. And off the top of my head, I can't remember all the wiring, but I'd gone through and done a bunch of wiring schematics and drawn stuff up. But that was probably in 2020. And so right off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly how that works. I do want to say that when it fails, it doesn't send the information, because it can adjust the spark, and then it just tells the DME when to fire. I believe that's the way it works. And so it does happen. Happy Fox, Jason. Also, you could pull up your new power cables and get the harness to mine directly from the red cable that goes straight from the battery. Project 944, Jim B from Chattanooga here. Shout out to all those 97 NAs out there, even if I have an 83 engines. Oh, yeah. So that's one of the guys' cars here right now. He has 87 that had a 83 engine in it, and we're building him a new engine now for it. It's almost done. Got to just get your engine out now. I planned on having it out already, but it shouldn't take us no time. It's always nice to build the engine first and drop the engine out and put the other one in. Jason said, thanks for the help. Well, probably wasn't much help, but I hope that I don't remember that ever having the Bluetooth stuck on. So maybe it's just a defect. Those retro ones seem to be a bit higher quality than some of the $10 and $20 ones you see on Amazon. But you never know. They're probably made in the same factory. So I don't think that even now, even top of the line, you're paying like $500 in some of those cases. I still don't think they're as good as the old ones, but I really do like them. So hopefully you get it figured out, and hopefully it's not the issue. He says the Bluetooth on standby should be hardly. Yeah, it should be. Happy Fox says, enjoying our forged rods, 82 to 83. Yep. He sure is. Well, we think we don't know exactly what happened to that engine. It's just got an 83 stamp on that in that 87 car. So what it looks like to me, and this isn't any disrespect to anyone, but it just from like appearance, he says it was leaking from everywhere. And looking at it, it looks like someone just took a, like they blew the 87 engine and they just went to a junkyard and threw an 83 in there without even running a cloth across it to wipe some dust off. So it's a good idea. I figured we're going to build another engine anyway. Might as well get them an 87 engine put back in there. Something I saw interesting the other day on another Facebook group was they were talking about these covers here for the S and the S2. Someone was looking for the color, and everybody in the comments was saying it's not a beige, it's not a sand beige. These were originally silver, and then they turn brown over time. And I'm here to tell you this one only has 57,000 miles on it, and you can see that it is indeed, it's almost like a pearl silver. It's got a little bit of different hues in it. So could be wrong, but it's silver, and it pretty interesting, because I'd always thought they were supposed to be beige as well. And then someone said they were supposed to be silver. And then we got this car in, and it is indeed silver, but like I said, it's almost like a pearl. It has a little bit of iridescence to it. And my money says 86,951 has forged rods. Yes, they do. All the way up until 89. In 89, they did away with the forged rods and the turbos. Any sport seats in the? Yes, the early cars also had sport seats. They're a completely different design, but they have sport seats. They're kind of blocky and squarish looking. Hard to describe, but weren't they kind of a beige originally on the last months? That was what everybody thought. So one guy was wanting to recolor his, repaint it, and he was asking for the paint code because someone online told him it was a sand color, but it is indeed silver. They were originally silver. Do I own it? My money has to own it. Yes, I own a turbo. I own an 87 turbo. Now, there's a caveat to that. It's in a 924S body. Elliot says, is it running? No. It's everybody else's car seems to be running except mine. I have not worked on it. I bought a couple of new cars, and I have not done anything to any of the cars that I own. So going through, I just sold an 84 944. It was white. I got hit by a truck, sold it to a guy. He's got it fixed up really nice now. And then I've got a black 85 and a half. And then I've got a garnet 85 and a half. And then I've got 87 924S that's turbocharged. I got another 87 924S. And then I've got an 88 924S. I also have a white 924S, but that's going to scrap. That was a parts car. But then I had an 83, and then I sold that one too. So I've had just about one of every single year. Yeah, I don't get spare time. This is my spare time, and I spend it with you guys. This is where I'd rather be. Maybe one day, well, the thought is that eventually I'll be able to hire enough people that they can keep this going. And, I'm just here to make sure that everything's done right, because I'm still going to be like the hands-on building engines, and I'm going to be hands-on putting the belts on. But aside from that, anybody, anybody that's trained can put wheel bearings on and do a good job. We don't rush people here. We try and make sure that everything's done right. So you don't have to be, oh, the book hour was this, just if that needs to be done, it needs to be done. And so eventually then I'll have the spare time to get my car back on the road. But it's a little bit more than that. When I started buying my other cars, I was like, oh, I already have a red 924S, so let's paint it white. And I got neck deep into painting it, and I needed a new clutch, put a new clutch in it, and I got the engine back in there, and I just ended up doing other stuff. Yeah, there'll be a whole new generation doing this before long. So I started doing it when I was in my 20s, and so now it's time to let the next generation do it, because I'm still able to do it just fine. But I do miss my cars. I do miss my free time sometimes. Like sometimes you just have to. I try and work as many days as I can, but sometimes you just have to. I've never been one of those people. I work on my birthdays and I work during Christmas. My wife won't let me do that stuff, but and I was single, and now I'm getting a little bit older, and I'm like, sometimes you just got to have that day to just decompress. So, so as I'm getting older, I'm doing that a little bit, at least once a year. I'll just take that day, and I'm like, all right, I'm not doing anything work related today. But I eventually want to have a shop big enough where I can have my projects in here, and then I can eventually work on them here. I gotta get a bigger shop though, because I just don't have the room for everything. We've got probably 15 cars here now, and if I brought all my projects over, which I have 2 here, but if I brought them all over here and I want to get my turbo running, we'd have 20 something cars. And then well, it would be 364 if I was still single. My wife makes me take at least a day off a week, but I still end up working on other stuff and doing invoices or whatever else. But sometimes I'm just like, I can't even do that today. It's got to take that time off. But in my next shop, I'm hoping that all the projects can be here, and like we got 15 cars, and I got 2 more coming in, so it's already a madhouse around here. So but yeah, guys. So Kevin asked, are you bringing the 924S to 944 Fest this year, or are you thinking you might have the black project ready? So that black car project was supposed to have been running by now, and the idea was that originally the plan was I get a truck, I buy a big trailer where I can build the black car project, and that's going to be like head to toe eventually. But right now, I just get it running where I can drive it and enjoy it, and then work on it a little bit at a time. And then over time, that's going to be like the perfect example of what we do here. It's going to have an all brand new engine, new torque tube, transmission. Everything's going to be nice and clean, and I go park it at 944 Fest wrapped in the business library. But that's going to take time, and I was going to buy the truck so I could haul that car and the 924S. But yeah, that thing, we tried to start it. It was leaking fuel from the injectors, and I thought, well, I don't want to try and start it until I get that fixed. So we got that fixed, put new injectors in there, and we got fuel flowing, and it still doesn't start. And then I'm looking at the cooling system, and I mean, we pressurized it. There's no hoses that are off on there, and it doesn't hold pressure at all. So it's probably just gonna need the engine ripped out of it and rebuilt. So rather than doing that, I'll just build an engine for it on the stand, and then when it's time, I'll take that engine out, put another one in there, and just do it that way. It's a lot easier. It's a lot less painless than trying to pull an engine, spending like 6 months trying to rebuild the thing and clean it up. It's just easier to take an engine you already got cleaned up and go from there. So that's the idea. But at this point, that car is probably going to be sitting there. Yeah, it's a good thing. Happy Fox says it's a good thing with these cars. You can always drive them while working on them. It doesn't got the limp modes or something. Exactly. Yeah. So some of the later cars have limp modes and stuff, but yeah, this car here, you just get it started and it runs, and I'm like, okay, now I'll get it painted. I'm not going to paint it until I get it running, but it needs so much, and I'm probably going to have to pull every coolant hose out of that car. At this point, I might as well just pull the engine and see what's going on with it. So it doesn't look like that's going to happen this year. I am so far behind on stuff. So and we'll get caught up and then we'll talk. Right now, we've got this 968 turbo project here. It's wired up. We're trying to finagle the intercooler and figure out where we're going to move the intake, because when we got the car, it was from a wrecked car. It was already turbocharged, but there was a bunch of just little cut corners here and there. So we're trying to take it up a notch and fix all the little details on it. So that one's going to be a while. This red turbo's been here forever, and we're just waiting on the radiator. I ordered that radiator like a month ago, and I haven't got it, because as soon as it gets that radiator, it's out of here. And not only am I going to be happy, I'm sure the owner will be happy. But then I got some other stuff here that is just taking forever. But once these long-term things that are just eating me up are gone, then maybe I'll have a little bit of free time. Let's see. Elliot says definitely clutch slave is out on mine. So last time I loaded it, I used the starter to get it in first and reverse as needed. I've seen people have to do that many times. A lot of people are surprised at how strong these starters can be. Stuart says, I can't wait till April in the UK so I can send you pics of the 3 944s you helped us save. The third, I nearly finished. You're a legend. Thank you so much. Yeah, I can't wait to see those pics. There was a time where, if you're not yet, go ahead and on over to my Facebook group and share those pictures when you get them. And anybody else can do the same. So a lot of people over there talk about what they're doing to their cars and everything, and it can get kind of slow, but feel free to share whatever you want over there. I like to see everybody's cars. Happy Fox says, is that 3 liter? Yes, it's 3 liter 16 valve turbo. You can see my mess over here. So we cleaned the shop up one day and it's a mess again the next day. So that's just the way it goes around here. I had to spend like half the day going through all my parts just to see what I had, so that way I don't order doubles, because sometimes that happens. Elliot says they're strong, but I'm never with Esper. That's a good idea. And I heard that some places now have the rebuilt Bosch starter, so that's something to definitely look into. So I ordered a few from Parts Geek, and yeah, they're cheap, and they're cheap for a reason. So yeah. So Mark asked, when you turbo a 968, you have to lower compression. Yes, because the 968's compression is 11-1, and what they've done, the other shop. So a little backstory on this turbo conversion. The guy wanted a 968 turbo, and I told him we'd do it, but it would probably be better, and I know it's a long shot, to find an already turbocharged 3-liter engine. And the reason why I said that was because it's not going to save you any money by the time we go through and we have to fabricate the intake and the exhaust and all the other little pieces. You're better off starting with a car that's already done that way. They're out there, and When you know it, somebody had it done. It was wrecked, but the engine was perfectly intact. We did have to replace like a motor mount and the bell housing, but other than that, but we tore the whole engine down. We sleeved it, and we used Darton wet sleeves. And then we went with Wasner pistons. They had used the stock pistons and put a 10 millimeter head gasket in there to lower the compression. And then basically I had like vacuum plumbing off a shop vac to like do the boost hoses and stuff. And it's like, okay. So yeah, we put some lower compression Wasner pistons in there, and now it's making around 8.5. They're deep. They're like instead of baseball in this thing. But they're deep. They're about 8.5 now, but and then we got a giant turbo going back on this thing. So yeah, we've lowered the compression the right way, and this time we just used a wide fire head gasket rather than that was a no. We went with a we did an MLS gasket on this. Yeah, not a wide fire. We did a multi-layer gasket on this, but this time the multi-layer gasket wasn't as thick. And I don't even know where they got it, because when we took it off, I called Lindsay Racing up, and because it was a Cometic, had Cometic stamped on it, and I said, "Have you ever seen anything like that?" He said, "Man, I've never seen anything like that." So that was pretty interesting. I don't even know where they got that. They had to order that from Cometic or something. So how much horsepower? So that's a good question. We're going to have it tuned. We're expecting that this thing could probably have it max up. Well, the way we built it with the sleeves and the pistons and all this stuff, it could probably handle 700, but I don't, maybe more. But it's not going to go that high. We're probably going to go around 500. It's going to be probably a little street car, but it'll be one of those street cars that should have like plenty of low end power. So it'll be a lot of fun to drive. Is it going to be more efficient than a 2.7, a 2.5, or 2.7 with the same horsepower? More than likely. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to really draw. I mean, you got half a liter bigger there. So yeah, it's going to be, you got a lot more to work with. Basically, you're going to make more power just due to the displacement without having to run the turbo or anything is hard. So yeah, on the same boost, you're going to get more power. And that's kind of the idea behind it. But it's also got the variocam. It's 16 valve. So where the factory used the 8 valve, we're using the 16 valve. And it's still going to have the variocam. So we've seen it a few different ways. We've seen them. Don't see many of the 16 valve 3 liter turbos. Mostly see the 8 valve with the 2.7 liter heads. And when you do see the 16 valve heads, then they disable the variocam. So, but we're going to have the variocam and all that. So, more torque, of course, but fuel consumption. That's a good question. That's a very good question. So, basically, we're going to have to send it to the tuner and then get all that information. Everything is completely different than what they had when this car came here. Like I said, they had turbocharged this by basically stock bottom in, putting thicker head gasket on here, and the boost hoses and all this stuff was just kind of, I think that they literally ran that thing on 5 psi. So they sent it to someone, they fabbed this stuff up that must have cost like $10,000 only to run like 5 psi on here. And what boost it's going to run now, that's going to be up to the tuner when we send it to him. So I would have to get all that information. So we won't really know until we run it. We've got an idea. Basically, I called the tuner. He selected the injectors and he sent them out to us. It's back in the old days, I'd probably try to tune this thing myself, but I don't have time to do that stuff no more. And it's a system that I don't have any idea of how to do it. Hopefully it's going to start up. We're going to get it to the tuner, and then we're going to know what we're dealing with. But yeah, it's going to be a lot up to him. But yeah, someone asked to see him. I'm going to get off here in just a minute. We've been on here for an hour and 17 minutes now. So yeah, we have I'm just going to show you a few things. So we got the 924S turbo project over here. It's still coming along. We've got this 944 turbo here. This thing was a giant mess when we got it, but now it's beautiful. So we're getting ready to finish up the balance shafts here. We just got to put the seals in, put the cam in. Got a brand new head on here. Well, rebuilt head. Turbo's being rebuilt right now. And then we have all new silicone hoses that he supplied. I believe this is the only 944 online kit, the 944 online kit. So that's going to be really nice. And then we've got another turbocharged 924S right here. We have the engine over there. I can't really get to it. And then these parts should be in Monday. We just got to put the water pump back on. We're going to time it. The oil cooler seals are already done. Front main seal, I believe, is already in. So this should go back together. But then we're going to put some speakers in here and a radio. So we're putting all 4 speakers all the way around in. And then new radio. And we got to fix the door lock. And we got to put new hood struts on. But this one here, this one's the saddest one because it's just needing freaking radiator. So just waiting on the radiator. And then it's ready to go. And then this one here, we're doing the intercooler right now. So this is how the intercooler is set up. And then they had originally cut up the car to run this pipe 90 degrees. And I'm talking 90 degrees, and you can't even get your finger between this right here to run this way and then come out through here and then run over. And then you had like the stock air box here, which was not that bad, but you got that 90 degree, you can't even get your finger in there too. So what we're going to do is, if you can see this side, so this was kind of modified already. I don't know if you guys can see it, but this is modified so that way that could go to the intake. And then we cut this area out here. What we're going to do is we're going to do that same thing on this side, and we're going to run it up so that way both these pipes will have a straight shot from the turbo. And then we're going to probably run the air filter on down into the fender or something. We'll probably come up with something with that. Or under behind the bumper somewhere. Just kind of spitballing ideas right now. But yeah, that's pretty much everything in here for now. Let's see. Yeah, exactly. Hopefully it'll start. It better. Happy Fox says my radiator is 41 years old. You recommend a non-plastic one if you need to swap it? So, yes. The way it goes around here is we won't see something for a long time. A radiator will go out. I hadn't seen that in 6 months. But when one goes out, they all go out. If one radiator's bad, suddenly every single car in here has got a bad radiator. It's just like an alternator. Oh, I hadn't seen one of those. I hadn't seen an alternator go out in 5 years. Then every car in here have a bad radiator alternator. All of a sudden, it comes in waves. It's the strangest thing. And so when we order these, we do not. He had a spare one in the trunk. It was a spare factory one, and he had one. Both of those leaked. So the way we test them was we put them up on a pressure tester, and then we can see the suds coming out of them. So I thought, well, this one has a 944 turbo radiator. Let's just see. I've got tons of them over at the other shop. I'm like, well, let's go see if I can just his leaks, and I'll just give him a radiator. I just play musical radiators because apparently every one I'm coming across is blown. And then his was leaking, like just as bad as I'm like, what the heck is going on? So I mean, you put water in it. And I mean, it wasn't from our pressure tester because we would just put them in water, and they were leaking water before we even pressure tested them. It's like, what the heck is going on? So I go over to the O shop, and all those are leaking now. So yeah, if on an NA, it's not, I don't see as many of those, but on turbos, it's almost every one of them starts leaking. So if you can get one that's metal, just go with that. Probably you'll be happy that you did. At this point, at this age and everything, it's just better to just go ahead with the metal ones. Casey says, my car is still broke. I got the injectors back last week and they checked out great. The airflow meter is being rebuilt. That's my next hope. Yeah, man, I'm sorry to hear that. I know you've been having some problems with it. Basically, it taking his car apart to fix a leak, and then when you put it back together, it just never worked again. Didn't want to run it right. And Happy Fox says it's German prime obsolescence. I don't know why they did that, but I have had to fix one on the side of the road before. I had a radiator. I think it was in my burgundy car. It started leaking on the side of the road, and I just got a pair of pliers because it's just plastic with a rubber gasket. I reached up in there and pinched it back together and never had another problem. But I tried to fix one of these here, and the more you'd pinch it, the worse it would just get. Now the leak just moved down, so I'm like, I don't even know. I give up on that. So I just got lucky that one time. But yeah, you just never know, man. So anyway, guys, I appreciate y'all coming out. I want to thank you again for being here. I hope you have a great day. It is almost 1:30, and I think I got a car going home. So wish me luck. And we will see you guys again next week. Have a great week, and we'll see you then.